Good evening and welcome to War Thunder's website. I am Old Dead Man. This is my second attempt to record this video. I just spent 22 and a half minutes talking to a muted microphone. So, there's your entertainment for the day. That's right, Gaijin's got the F8U-2 Crusader II coming your way in the next update of War Thunder, Ixwa Strike. So let's see what they've got in store for us. The Vought F8U-2 Crusader II, later known as the F8C, was a single-engine supersonic carrier-borne air superiority jet fighter built for the U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and the French Navy. Unconventional for fighters of the time, the Crusader was equipped with a variable incidence wing, which changes the angle of attack rather than the sweep geometry, mounted in a high wing position. This allowed the Crusader to have a better angle of attack during takeoff and landing, which improved forward visibility and increased lift. In addition, the design took advantage of the latest innovations with all-moving stabilators, dogtooth notching at the wing folds for improved yaw stability, and, of course, titanium. This aircraft was the last fighter designed with the primary armament focused on the four 20mm cannons. She could also carry Mighty Mouse FFAR rockets in a retractable tray and two AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles on cheek pylons. Despite its supposed intention to be a guns-based fighter, most of its kills were credited to the Sidewinder missiles and the guns were considered pretty unreliable. The prototype conversion of an F8U-1 into an F8U-2 was Bureau number 140477, which made its first flight in August 1957 at Naval Air Station Dallas. The first production unit was Bureau number 145546, which made its first flight in August 1958. Operators of the F8U include France and the Philippines. The F8U-2 was 55.25 feet long, 15.75 feet tall, with a 35.17-foot wingspan and an empty weight of 18,950 pounds. It was powered by the Pratt & Whitney J57 P16 jet engine, which developed 10,700 pounds of thrust with an afterburner boosting that to 16,900 pounds that drove this aircraft to 1,105 miles per hour. The four 20mm Colt Mark 12 cannons with 144 rounds per gun were considered somewhat unreliable and were supplemented with up to four AIM-9D Sidewinder missiles and up to 8 Zuni rockets in 2 packs. An AN/APQ-83 radar was retrofitted into the aircraft during later upgrades. An all-weather version, the F8U-2N, was also produced with the unguided rocket pack replaced with a fuel tank and utilizing the J57 P20 engine. In War Thunder, the F8U-2 will be the top dog of naval aviation in the U.S. tech tree at rank 6, with AIM-9B or AIM-9D Sidewinders, Mighty Mouse and Zuni rockets, and four 20mm Colt autocannons. It is expected to have a top speed of Mach 1.95 and a climb rate of around 130 meters per second. When possible, I love to find stories of those who risk their lives in these machines of modern warfare and share them. This is the story of Cliff Judkins, the F8 Crusader II pilot who had to manually eject from his stricken fighter and fell 15,000 feet into the Pacific Ocean. This story is shortened for length. The full story is linked in the description below. Judd, you're on fire! Get out of there! Needless to say, that startling command got my attention. As you will read in this report, this was just the beginning of my problems. And it all started in the brilliant sunlight 20,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean as I nudged my F8 Crusader jet into position behind the lumbering, deep-bellied refueling plane. After a moment of jockeying for position, I made the connection and matched my speed to that of the slowpoke tanker. I made the graceful task of plugging into the trailing fuel conduit so they could pump fuel into my tanks. This in-flight refueling process was necessary and routine, because the F8 could not hold enough fuel to fly from California to Hawaii. This routine mission was labeled Transpac, meaning flying airplanes across the Pacific. It had been going on for years. Soon after plugging into the tanker, my fuel gauges stirred, showing that all was well. In my cockpit, I was relaxed, confident. As I was looking around, I was struck for an instant by the eeriness of the scene. Here I was, attached, like an unwanted child, by an umbilicus to a gargantuan mother who was fleeing across the sky at 200 knots, as though from some unnamed danger. Far below us was a broken layer of clouds that filtered the sun glare over the Pacific. In my earphones, I heard Major Van Camp and our flight leader chatting with Major D.K. Tucker, who was on a Navy destroyer down below. Major Tucker had ejected from his aircraft the day before, in this same area, in fact, when his Crusader flamed out mysteriously during the same type of refueling exercise. At that time, no one knew why his aircraft had flamed out. We all supposed it had been some freak accident that sometimes happens with no explanation. One thing we knew for sure, it was not pilot error. This accident had to be some kind of mechanical malfunction, but what? Our squadron had a perfect safety record and was very disturbed because of the loss of an airplane the day before. 11 minutes to mandatory disconnect point, the tanker commander said. I checked my fuel gauges again. Everything appeared normal. In a few hours, I knew we'd all be having dinner at the Kanoa Officers Club in Oahu, Hawaii. Then after a short rest, we'd continue our 6,000-mile trek to Atsugi, Japan, via Midway and Wake Island. Our whole outfit, Marine All-Weather Fighter Squadron 323, was being transferred to the Far East for a 1-year period of operations. 9 minutes to mandatory disconnect. My fuel gauges indicated that the tanks were almost full. I noticed that my throttle lever was sticking a little. That was unusual. The friction lock was holding it in place and was loose enough. It grew tighter as I tried to manipulate it gently. I could see the RPM gauge unwinding and the tailpipe temperature dropping. The aircraft had lost power. The engine had quit running. This is a flameout. I punched the mic button and said, "This is Judd, I've got a flameout." Unfortunately, my radio was already dead. I was neither sending nor receiving anything via my radio. I quickly disconnected from the tanker and nosed the aircraft over into a shallow dive to pick up some flying speed to help restart the engine. I needed a few seconds to think. I yanked the handle that extended the ram air turbine into the slipstream, hoping to get ignition for an air start. The igniters clicked gamely, and the RPM indicator started to climb slowly, as did the tailpipe temperature. That's a good indication that a restart was beginning. For one tantalizing moment, I thought everything would be all right. But the RPM indicator hung uncertainly at 30% of capacity and refused to go any faster. Not nearly enough power to maintain flight. The fire warning light blinked on. This is not a good sign. And to make matters worse, jet fuel poured over the canopy like water from a bucket. At the same instant, my radio came back on, powered by the emergency generator, and a great babble of voices burst through my earphones. "Judd, you're on fire! Get out of there!" Fuel was pouring out of my aircraft, from the tailpipe, from the intake duct, from under the wings, and igniting behind me in great, awesome trails of fire. The suddenness of the disaster overwhelmed me, and I thought, this can't be happening to me. The voices in my ears kept urging me to fire the ejection seat and abandon my aircraft. I pressed the mic button and told the flight leader, "I'm getting out!" Took my hands off the flight controls and reached above my head for the canvas curtain that would start the ejection sequence. I pulled it down hard over my face and waited for the tremendous kick in the pants, which would send me rocketing upward free of the aircraft. Nothing. The canopy, which was designed to jettison the first part of the ejection sequence, did not move. It was still in place, so was I. My surprise lasted only a second. Then I reached down between my knees for the alternate ejection firing handle and gave it a vigorous pull. Nothing happened. This is surprising. Both the primary and the secondary ejection procedures had failed, and I was trapped in the cockpit of this burning aircraft. The plane was now in a steep 60-degree dive. For the first time, I felt panic softening the edges of my determination. I knew that I had to do something or I was going to die in this sick airplane. There was no way out of it. With great effort, I pulled my thoughts together and tried to imagine some solution. The voice in my earphones was shouting, "Ditch the plane! Ditch it in the ocean!" It must have come from the tanker skipper or one of the destroyer commanders below, because every jet pilot knows you can't ditch a jet and survive. The plane would hit the water at high speed, flip over, and sink like a stone. And usually they'd blow up on impact. I grabbed the control stick and leveled the aircraft. Then I yanked the alternate handle again in an attempt to fire the canopy and start the ejection sequence. But still, nothing happened. That left me with only one imaginable way out, which was to jettison the canopy manually and try to jump from the aircraft without aid of the ejection seat. Was such a thing possible? I was not aware of any Crusader pilot who had ever used this World War II era tactic to get out of a fast-flying jet. I had been told that this procedure of bailing out of a jet was almost impossible. Yes, the pilot might get out of the plane, but the massive 20-foot high tail section is almost certain to strike the pilot's body and kill him before he falls free of the aircraft. My desperation was growing, and any scheme that offered a shred of success seemed better than riding that aircraft into the sea, which would surely be fatal. I disconnected the canopy by hand, and with a great whoosh, it disappeared from over my head, never to be seen again. Before trying to get out of my confined quarters, I trimmed the aircraft to fly in a kind of sidelong skid, nose high, with the tail swung around slightly to the right. Then I stood up in the seat and put both arms in front of my face. I was sucked out harshly from the airplane. I cringed as I tumbled outside the bird, expecting the tail to cut me in half. But that never happened. In an instant, I knew I was out of there and uninjured. I waited and waited until my body, hurtling through space, with the 225 knots of momentum, started to decelerate. I pulled the D-ring on my parachute, which is the manual way to open the chute if the ejection seat does not work automatically. I braced myself for the opening shock. I heard a loud pop above me, but I was still falling very fast. As I looked up, I saw that the small pilot chute had deployed. The small chute was designed to keep the pilot from tumbling until the main chute opens. But I also noticed a sight that made me shiver with disbelief and horror. The main 24-foot parachute was flapping in the breeze, tangled in its own shroud lines. It hadn't opened. I could see the white folds neatly arranged, fluttering feebly in the air. Frantically, I shook the risers in an attempt to balloon the chute and help it open. It didn't work. I pulled the bundle down toward me and wrestled with the shroud lines, trying my best to get the chute to open. The parachute remained closed. All the while, I am falling like a rock toward the ocean. I looked out hurriedly. There was still plenty of altitude remaining. I quickly developed a frustrating and sickening feeling. I wanted everything to halt while I collected my thoughts, but my fall seemed to accelerate. I noticed a ring of turbulence in the ocean. It looked like a big stone had been thrown in the water. It had white froth at its center. I finally realized that was where my plane had crashed into the ocean. Would I be next? Again, I shook the parachute risers and shroud lines, but the rushing air was holding the chute tightly in a bundle. I began to realize that I had done all I could reasonably do to open the chute, and it was not going to open. I was just along for a brutal ride that may kill or severely injure me. I descended rapidly through the low clouds. Now there was only clear sky between me and the ocean. This may be my last view of the living. I have no recollection of positioning myself properly or even bracing for the impact. In fact, I don't remember hitting the water at all. At one instant, I was falling very fast toward the ocean. The next thing I remember is hearing a shrill, high-pitched whistle that hurt my ears. Suddenly, I was very cold. In that eerie half-world of consciousness, I thought, am I alive? I finally decided, and not all at once, yes, I think I am. I think I am alive. The rest of Cliff's story is in the link in the description of his rescue, recovery, and of the two officers who came to find out why he was missing his .38 revolver. Really fascinating stuff. You ought to definitely check it out. Thank you for your service, Cliff Judkins. That's everything for tonight. What do you think of the addition of the Crusader II to the lineup in War Thunder? Is it something you're going to be pursuing in a hurry? Are you after it just for the fun of it? Let me know in the comments below what you think, and we will see you in War Thunder.